Good evening to you and a warm welcome to the Turning Point for ITN Sri Lanka. And as I keep telling you, on the Turning Point, we have lots of interesting guests. They all are experts in whatever field that they are in, and they're all answering questions that affect you, the people of Sri Lanka. And tonight, it's no different. We've got here, member of the NPP. That's right, this is ITN Sri Lanka. It's from the NPP, Dr. Harini Amarasuriya. Good evening, Dr. Harini, and thank you so much for coming.
Good evening for us. Thank you for having me on the show.
Indeed. And the Turning Point is available Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 6 to 6:30 p.m., usually live. And if you want to send questions, 0772 300 305, as always, by SMS or WhatsApp, and we'll take it up on another show. So, Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, AKD, next president of Sri Lanka?
For sure.
Absolutely certain?
Absolutely certain.
Why are you saying that? What makes you say that?
The pulse of the people. We are on the ground every day, talking to people, addressing people in every district of the country. Our entire team is busy working on this campaign, and the feedback we are getting is amazing. There is tremendous support for what AKD represents: change, integrity, change of political culture. And what's amazing for us is now that people are picking up the campaign and owning it. This is not just something that's driven by the party, right? It's not something that's driven by the NPP. Individuals, citizens of this country have owned this, taken responsibility for this, and they're running with it. So, you know, you walk into a shop and you start a conversation, and it becomes a bit of a messaging happening there for AKD. You go in a three-wheeler, same thing.
What do you think that is because of what? Frustration with what?
Frustration with, well, two things. I think people are really burdened by the economic crisis. This has been going on for so long with no relief. That's one thing. And I think the economic, the cost of living, this is a huge factor. But beyond that, I think what is really pushing people towards us is a deep sense of frustration with the existing political establishment. And the lack of empathy, the kind of disrespect that is shown towards people, even in how they campaign, right? So people are sick of that. And I think the 2022 Aragale had a lot to do with it, where people felt a sense of their own power as citizens and no longer want to be taken for granted or disrespected in the way that they are now. And they see the difference in how we engage in politics, how we engage with them. And I think that is also what's driving, well, that's what's making them choose AKD as the option. You know, if it was just the economic crisis, then, you know, they would look at all the different options. But they are choosing us because they know that we also offer a different political culture.
I hear what you say, and I've experienced some of what you said myself in my trips, visits around the country, while I was in a 6-month hibernating period. But that's a different story, which will be told sometime. But Sri Lankans tend to be a bit myopic. And they tend to forget. I'm not sure whether they forgive, but certainly they tend to forget very quickly. But that happened in England. Churchill comes to mind. What about this business? You know, we are here today. 2 years ago, we had this lone elephant who turned up and said, yeah, I'll take it on. And whatever's said and done, we have some form of, normality is the wrong word, but we have a semblance of stability. For want of a better word, and because Mr. Premadas isn't here, I can't, and I had no dictionary, so, you know, I can't say that. But therefore, let's call it stability, right? So here we have this man who's turned up, and we've got some sense of stability. The economy isn't rocking, but there are no queues. As a lot of people told me, tell polim nෑ මේ polim නෑ current එක තියෙනවා ළමයි ස්කෝලේට යනවා හැබැයි බඩු මිල නම් වැඩි. Now here's what I want to ask you. Let's say the Sri Lankans are myopic, maybe, but how is your party, how's your leader, how's the NPP going to bring the prices down?
Okay, so first of all, I disagree with you when you say that the Sri Lankan people are myopic and they forget. I don't think so. I think that's what you saw in the past. That's not the citizen. It's not the same citizen in 2022,
But the
2024.
reason I say that is, you know, Mahinda Rajapaksa was thrown out of office in 2015 only for his brother to be elected 4 or 5 years later.
But I think what happened between 2015 and 2019 had implications. The failure of Yahapalana was one, and the other was the very deliberately orchestrated campaign that brought Gotabaya back, which raised this specter of a country in crisis, as in like a imminent attack on the nation. Right?
The whole security thing.
The whole security thing was played up, linked to the Easter attack, all of these things. So that was a very carefully constructed campaign, and people have learned a bitter lesson from that. People have really learned a bitter lesson.
But haven't people learned a bitter lesson from the days when we spent hours and hours? Ashan, my person, he spent like, on one day he spent, I think, 3 days in a petrol queue. And we honestly didn't have gas, and we cooked in the garden. It was all fun, but, you know, it was inconvenient. Have people forgotten that,
No,
those dark days?
No, but
12,
I think,
13-hour power cuts?
But they've gone beyond just looking at, okay, no, there's no longer a queue. They're also asking questions about how was the queue created in the first place? What led to that? And in that sense, I think many people understand today that that corruption, that the political culture of graft and cronyism is at the bottom of all of this, and that unless you deal with that, these queues are going to come back at some point. Right? This is not a sustainable solution that is being offered right now. So people recognize that. So yes, there are no queues, but poverty has tripled. Kids are dropping out of school because they cannot afford school in a country that is ostensibly offering free education. Right? And there are multiple problems. I mean, real incomes have dropped. Right? So that is people's experience, not just there may be gas, but they can't afford to buy it. There's electricity 24 hours of the day, but they can't afford to turn the switch on, right? So those are real issues, and that in terms of a real impact on people's daily lives, there still hasn't been a drastic difference. So that's one thing. So your question was, what are we going to do about it?
Yes.
Well,
how will you drive the prices down?
Yeah, for one thing. There are policy proposals, and the policy manifesto that we have put out has to be seen as a whole, right? Not just sort of picking from here and there. So we have identified certain relief that can be immediately granted to people, but in the long term, our economic plan is about making this economy more sustainable, more self-sufficient, and resilient. Right? So we have a plan for that we need to implement systematically. But at the same time, we really want to give certain relief to people, because people are really suffering for us. And I know, as someone you're in touch with people, so you know what that reality is. So we have proposed a reduction or a removal of the VAT for certain essential items, like essential food, milk food, eggs, right? For essential medical equipment and medicines, and for education equipment, because those are 3 things that people are really struggling with, right? And we are proposing changes there. We are proposing to remove the VAT, to bring it to 0. Then we also want
on those items.
On those items. Then certain agricultural inputs that are necessary for us to get the agriculture sector going again for food security purposes, as well as to invest in that as an industry that can be a thriving industry and not just sort of a poverty-ridden kind of traditional industry. And then we have also proposed a certain certain increments in the kind of welfare benefits that are given, particularly to those the poorest of the poor, those suffering from long-term illnesses like CKDU and the disabled.
Now, this is all good, but let's say I was at the IMF, and I'll be listening to what Comrade AKD is saying, and Comrade Sajid, and even the young man, what he's saying. But I'll just sit there and say, okay, this is the revenue. When you do all these things, this revenue is going to go down. Where are you going to get the revenue to push it up again? That's all the IMF want to know.
Well, to be fair, the IMF has also said that we're not spending enough on social protection. They said that in their last...
and that's what the UNHCR is probably saying as well.
The UN is also saying that. The UN has put out quite a stark report on multi-dimensional poverty in Sri Lanka, and it's really shocking, right?
Yeah.
So most of those agencies are also saying we need to really strengthen our social protection systems. Where are we going to find the money? We have calculated approximately how much these proposed relief measures will cost us.
Yes,
and it's about 195 to 200 billion rupees for a year, right? And we have a plan of how to find that income, particularly in our first year, because in the second year we are anticipating our overall economy to improve and bring in different forms of income, right? But for us, you know how much revenue we are losing because of very poor tax collection.
Yes.
Right? There's a huge defaulting. There are huge defaulters. There are really poor systems for tax recovery, tax collection.
But I agree that there are lots of pseudo patriots in the country, but their patriotism extends to flying the flag.
Yeah,
and saying, I am Sri Lankan and I'm proud to be Sri Lankan. But sadly, the tax file doesn't demonstrate that.
Absolutely.
And I say this to every party's candidates and representatives who turn up here. I've said it all, the same thing all the time.
Right. So one of the things we're really going to focus on is better tax collection, more efficient tax collection, and really dealing with the corruption in that system. And we think about 60 to 65 billion can be recovered from that. Then we also anticipate there's a huge leakage in our customs, right? Again, because of the very complicated custom rules, as well as leakages in customs as well, right? And again, we think we can get a similar amount from customs, and also better revenue collection. So our focus is on better revenue collection. Right?
What about people who fly off to Dubai and arrive through the VIP lounges carrying suitcases full of telephones and kilo after kilo of gold, only to pay 10% under the customs ordinance, and then 10% of a kilo of gold is absolute peanuts.
So exactly. So making sure, really dealing with this issue of corruption and the abuse of privileges that allow them to do those things. And the other thing is also by cutting expenditure, right? Really, it's also about reprioritizing the budget.
To reprioritize our time, my producer is saying I need to go for a break.
Sure.
So after the break, we'll be rejoining Dr. Harini Amarasuriya from the NPP here on Turning Point for ITN Sri Lanka. See you on the other side of the break.
ගුණ පර පරපුරක සහතිකය Anchor.
Let's fire it up.
Introducing Prima Kothumi Korean Ramen.
Let's fire it up.
නව best ever sunlight. පෙරටත් වඩා සුවඳක් සමගින් සුපිරි සේදුමක්.
Hot flavors, fun ඇවිල්ල දිව නලියන සැප දැවිල්ල. Him flirty diamond feature get crazy රැල්ල. To Spanish shots had I six pack එක ඇඟේ හැපේ crop top එක හිරට ඇනේ කොතුමි දැන් පන්න තමයි. Prima කොතුමි fun තමයි.
වීව එකතුණු උකුතේ එකක
රස උපරිමයි.
බුද්ධිමත් ඇගේ තීරණය Prima Stella. අපි හැමෝම කැමති.
ලක්ස් කියන්නේ සබන් ගැටයක් විතරක් නෙවෙයි. සමට සත්කාරයක්. නව ලක්ස්.
කමුද මචං ප්‍රීමා කොත්තුමි ෆන් තමයි.
Prima කොතුමි fun තමයි.
Introducing Prima Kothumi Korean Ramen.
Let's fire it up.
රට හදන සැලසුම් මදුරවිතානගේ අජිත් මාන්න පෙරුම ගෙවිඳු කුමාරතුංග සුනිල් වටගල සුධර්මන් සමක තුලාව අද රාත්‍රී 10:30ට
කුසලානයක් අරන් ආපු සන්ධානය. උණ්ඩයක් නිසා ASPට වෙච්ච දෙයක්. හමුදාව අඩු කරන්න හදන සජි. අනුර අලුතෙන් ගේන්න හදන එක. හතරක් නැති කළ 14 වෙඩික්කරු. දෙස් විදෙස් පුවත් රැසක් සමගින් හමුවෙමු සවස 6:30 අපගේ ප්‍රධාන ප්‍රවෘත්ති විකාශයක් සමගින්.
And welcome back to the Turning Point for ITN Sri Lanka. Our guest tonight is Dr. Harini Amarasuriya from the NPP. Dr. Amarasuriya, obviously, you know, when you're on Turning Point, you probably get a bit colourblified. And so I think you made a few mistakes on the figures.
On the figures.
Yes.
Yeah, so what I was saying was that we have identified the customs,
Yes.
inland revenue and excise as the three areas where we can prevent some of the leakages and
Okay.
increase our income and meet the costs that
Of your
costs of our the relief measures.
Yeah.
So we are thinking about approximately 170 from inland revenue,
Yeah.
increasing that. Then another 150 billion from our customs, and 15 billion from excise. So those are our targets for
Is it 15?
15, right?
So you're out looking at about 325 billion.
That we can save, or that we can bring in as income to the government,
Right.
for government income. And we are also looking at reprioritizing the budget, so cutting down on expenses, shifting money from certain areas into things like health and education.
And what about, would you be looking at the public service?
We will be looking at the public service. We do not, and to be fair for us, we can't overnight sack people. That's not possible. That's not fair.
The
right?
Supreme Court's already overloaded.
Yes.
The poor judges, I don't mean that financially, but I mean the poor judges have got enough of work already.
Yeah, so exactly.
The whole country going there.
So
on
what we
fundamental.
want to do is we want to redeploy, retrain and redeploy, because there's plenty of work to be done in the country, right? Some of them may go for early retirement. We don't, you know, that's also a possibility, but we really need to reorganize the public sector. So
Do we
that
have the money to do a VRS scheme or not? A voluntary?
No, probably not immediately, but that's something we are going to have to think about, right? But there's also this, that we have, you know, everybody keeps talking about how the public sector is bloated, and it is, but it's bloated in the levels that we actually don't require that much skill. So it's the drivers, the peons, that's where the politicians can stuff their people. The actual technical positions some of them are vacant, some of them have not been filled in years, right? So we are going to have to address that as well, especially for IRD, customs, right? In the education sector, in many technical positions, we have vacancies, right? So this requires a real reorganizing of the public sector, not an ad hoc, politically driven approach, but a reorganization of the public sector based on the plan that we have for the country, right? So that's what we are planning.
Let's ask this question quite openly. Experience versus theory, and with some people, but I don't mean y'all, rhetoric. Who do you think the people will go for? Surely, won't people go for experience rather than a plan?
Experience in what?
Experienced in governance?
Running the country to the ground? They haven't run the country. They have basically driven it to the ground.
Right.
Right? So they have experience in that. And I think people are looking for a change. They're looking for someone who can lead them out of the mess. And they certainly know that those who have been in power are not capable of doing that, because had they the capacity to do that, we wouldn't be in the mess we are today.
And Dr. Harini, what about the whole ideology of this? I've met people in Colombo and in Kurunegala. Kurunegala, by the way, has after Colombo has the most number of registered millionaires. Okay.
Interesting.
Well, yes, because of all the coconuts. Pull, you know. Anyway, now I want to ask you this. These people whom I met, they're like almost pulling their hairs out, right? And say, I don't know what will happen to my land. Ape deepolata mona veda danna me JVP kattiya aawa Amla Kumara sahodariya aapwama mona veda kiyala danne naha. So what's the ideology? Are you going to continue with this sort of capitalist, socialist sort of system? I know we can't be purely neoliberal because our country isn't rich enough for that. But our people need help as well. So, but what's your ideology? That's what I'm asking.
I think none of those labels are of any importance, because if you're asking me what do we have now, what do we have now? What we have now is crony capitalism. This is not a functioning capitalist system, right? So none of those really matter. Those labels don't matter. What is important is what we are going to do.
What about the families who own more than 50 acres per person?
We are not going to nationalize, or what's the word?
Nationalize.
Yeah,
yes.
Nationalize anyone's property. I mean, this is a complete falsehood that is being propagated. I saw some random SMS which what's been sent around on WhatsApp saying we are going to ban foreign travel, we are going to stop credit card payments, we are going to take over private property, you know, we are going to take over people's vehicles. This is all absolute nonsense that is being propagated by our opponents who don't have the guts to come and talk to us on or debate us on policy, right? So on their platforms, they're just trying to create this kind of fear about what might happen, because now I think they've accepted the fact that we are going to win, right? So they're trying to scare people, right, into the creation.
So this is fear-mongering.
This is fear-mongering.
So
this is actually
the NPP is not going to
Absolutely
nationalize
not.
anything?
What would we do with that? I mean, that's absolutely
What's the
not.
NPP's position on state-owned enterprises? Are you going to
State-owned-
continue with state-owned
No,
enterprises?
state-owned enterprises, we are going to do a proper audit of all the state-owned enterprises, and then there are certain strategic areas where we think government interest has to be maintained for things like national security, for things like for national security, and also for economically strategic reasons, right?
Okay.
So things like the energy sector, we think the government still has to have a stake. In the banking and financial sector, the government has to have a stake, right? So, but whatever doesn't need to be kept by the government for either national security, economic security, or
What will you do
other
to things
reasons.
like Sri Lankan Airlines, for example?
Sri Lankan Airlines is something we really need to study. It would be great to have our own airline because we are a country that we really want to.
Well, it's the only airline that brings passengers from Europe on a direct flight.
Exactly. So, in terms of tourism, it's important, right?
Yeah.
But whether we can afford to keep it is something we are going to have to really figure out. And for that, we need experts also who will be able to analyze the situation and tell us exactly what needs to be done, whether it's a change of management, whether it's a public-private partnership, or whether we just completely hand it over to the
NPP is
private
not
sector.
averse to public-private partnerships.
No.
Right. And so all these people who have property,
Yeah, they can just relax.
they can relax?
They can absolutely relax.
They don't have to start transferring it to
No.
Baba's name and
No.
Aya's name and all that.
No, just relax.
Right.
Be aware of what.
Turn up on the 21st
Turn up
and
on
put
the
the X.
21st and put the X with the Mali Mawa.
Oh, right. It's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that.
Well, okay. Well, I don't know. Let's see what the people do then. But does Anurukumara have what it takes to deal with the West, to deal with the Chinese, to deal with the Indians, dare I say, deal with the Americans, and Sir Starmer, out there. He's the former Attorney General in Britain, and he knows all about human rights abuses and all of that. And he's concerned, and he will be concerned about Sri Lanka's lack of compliance with international agreements, which Sri Lanka has signed.
No, I mean.
So
we
has
alre-
Italy got that?
Yeah, yes, because we are already dealing with them. We've spoken to them. We speak to them regularly. We meet with with the international members of the international diplomatic community regularly. We meet with the international agencies, the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, all of these. I mean, they're not unfamiliar to us, and we are not unfamiliar to them.
Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, thank you very much. Dr. Harini Amarasuriya from the NPP, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, Farah.
And may the best candidate win.
And we all know who that is.
Well, we
Thank
don't
you.
know. We don't know. We'll find out. But this is the independence of the Turning Point on ITN Sri Lanka. And it's 5 days a week. Thank you for watching. Take care and bless you all.
ඔයා මගේ පුතා